I always trusted my wife, Emily. We had been married for nearly 7 years, and though we had our ups and downs, I believed honesty was the foundation of our marriage. But recently, things started to feel different. She'd been coming home late more often, claiming she was working late at the office. At first, I brushed it off, after all, deadlines happen. But little things didn't add up. The office didn't seem as busy when I called. Her stories about meetings didn't always make sense. And then, one evening, she slipped up and mentioned something that contradicted where she said she had been the night before. That's when a sickening thought crept into my mind: what if she wasn't really at work? I tried to push the doubts away, but they gnawed at me. Finally, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to follow her the next time she said she had to stay late. That night, Emily kissed me goodbye, grabbed her purse, and told me not to wait up. The moment she drove off, I grabbed my jacket and followed at a distance. My heart pounded with every turn she made. I was hoping, praying, that I'd find her at her office desk, proving my suspicions wrong. But when she parked, it wasn't at her office. It was outside a small restaurant across town. My stomach dropped. And then I saw him, another man, waiting by the entrance. Emily stepped out of the car, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months, and walked straight into his arms. I froze in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart hammered in my chest, every beat echoing the truth I didn't want to accept. She wasn't working late. She was meeting him. I watched as they embraced, quickly, but with a kind of warmth I hadn't felt from her in weeks. Then they went inside together, laughing like old friends sharing a secret. I sat there, staring through the windshield, torn between storming in and demanding answers or staying hidden to learn the full truth. My pride wanted me to confront them immediately. But a deeper voice inside told me, not yet. You need to know everything, So, I waited. Minutes crawled by like hours. Through the restaurant window, I saw them sitting close, her hand brushing his as they talked. She leaned in, smiling, her eyes shining in a way I thought was reserved for me. Every second burned. Betrayal seeped into my bones, but I kept still. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, they stood up. I ducked down slightly as they walked out of the restaurant. He held the door for her, and she looked at him with a softness that crushed me inside. Then came the final blow. She kissed him on the cheek, lingering longer than she ever did with me anymore. It felt like my world collapsed in that moment. But I knew this wasn't the end. I needed proof. I needed answers. And I wasn't going to stop until I had them. I drove home that night in silence, my mind racing with questions that refused to stop. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And most of all, why had she chosen to lie to me instead of telling me the truth? When Emily finally came home, I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch TV. She walked in, carrying the same tired expression she always put on after her so-called long days at work. Sorry I'm late, she said, dropping her purse on the table. The office was crazy tonight. Her lie slid so effortlessly off her tongue that it almost scared me. I nodded, pretending to believe her. But inside, anger boiled. I decided not to confront her right away. If she could lie so easily, then I needed more than just my words, I needed undeniable proof. The next day, I took a personal day off from work. Emily left in the evening, claiming yet again she had to stay late. This time, I followed her from the moment she pulled out of the driveway. My pulse raced as I tailed her across town. Sure enough, she pulled into the same restaurant. And there he was again, waiting. My chest tightened as I watched them greet each other like they belonged together. But this time, they didn't just eat. They walked hand in hand down the street afterward, stopping at a park bench. She laughed in a way I hadn't heard in months, resting her head on his shoulder. I snapped a picture with my phone, my hands shaking, my heart breaking. Proof. Evidence. The kind she couldn't deny. And as I sat there watching them, I realized something chilling. She hadn't just lied about working late, she was living a second life. The image of her head resting on his shoulder was burned into my mind. Even after I drove home, even after I crawled into bed pretending to be asleep when she returned, it haunted me. She slipped under the covers, kissed me on the cheek, and whispered, "Good night." That whisper cut deeper than a knife. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know who he was. I pulled up the photo I had taken and zoomed in, studying his face. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. He wasn't someone from her office, of that I was certain. So I started digging. During lunch, I drove to the restaurant where I had seen them. I asked the hostess casually if she had seen the couple who came in late a few nights a week. She nodded, lowering her voice as if it were some secret. "Oh, yes, they've been in here a lot lately. Sweet couple. They always sit by the window. Sweet couple." My stomach turned at those words. Then she said something that nearly knocked the air out of me. "I think his name is Daniel." She called him that once. Daniel. That name sent a shiver down my spine. Daniel wasn't a stranger. He was someone from our past, a friend of Emily's from college. I remembered him faintly from stories she used to tell me, always brushing him off as just someone I used to know. But clearly, he was more than that. And now, all the puzzle pieces started to fall into place. Daniel. The name echoed in my head all day like a curse. I remembered the way Emily used to talk about him when we first started dating, always with a smile, always with a fondness that I brushed off as nostalgia. She swore they had drifted apart, that he was just part of her past. But now he was back. And he wasn't just part of her past, he was part of her present. That evening, I decided I couldn't sit still anymore. When Emily once again claimed she had to work late, I didn't just follow her this time. I planned to confront her. I drove behind her, keeping my distance until she parked at the restaurant. My heart thudded in my chest as I watched her step out of the car, her face lighting up the moment she saw him. The way she smiled at Daniel was the same way she used to smile at me when we first fell in love. They walked inside, hand brushing hand, like two people with nothing to hide. I parked down the block, sat there for 5 minutes, and then got out. Every step toward that restaurant felt heavier than the last, but my anger carried me forward. When I pushed open the door, the bell chimed overhead. Conversations buzzed, glasses clinked, laughter filled the air. And then, silence. Emily looked up from her table. Her eyes widened in shock as she saw me standing there. Daniel turned slowly, confusion on his face. I walked straight to their table, my voice low but firm. "So this is what working late looks like." Emily's face drained of color. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, no one spoke. The clinking of silverware from other tables had stopped, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears. Emily's mouth opened, but no words came out. Finally, she stammered, I can explain." "Explain?" I said, my voice cutting through the silence. I pulled my phone from my pocket and placed it on the table, the picture of her leaning on Daniel's shoulder glowing on the screen. "Explain this. Explain why you've been lying to me for weeks." Daniel cleared his throat nervously, leaning back in his chair. "Look, maybe we should talk about this privately." I snapped my eyes at him. "You don't get to say a word. Not to me. Not when you've been sneaking around with my wife." A murmur rippled through the restaurant, people whispering, phones half raised as if waiting to record the drama unfolding. Emily's hands trembled as she tried to reach for mine, but I pulled away. "It's not what you think," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "It's complicated." I leaned in closer, my tone sharp but steady. Complicated is when you forget an anniversary. This is betrayal. Her eyes filled with tears, and Daniel sat frozen, like a man caught in headlights. The truth was laid bare in front of everyone, and there was no way she could cover it now. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, and the entire room seemed to tense with me. "Enjoy your dinner," I said coldly. "Because when you come home tonight, it won't be your home anymore." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving her pale and speechless, and him staring after me. I drove home in silence, my grip on the steering wheel so tight it felt like my bones might snap. Every memory of our marriage replayed in my head, holidays, laughter, late-night talks, and each one felt tainted now, poisoned by her lies. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't sit in the car to gather myself. I walked straight inside, my mind already made up. I pulled a suitcase from the closet and began throwing her clothes into it. Every shirt, every dress, every pair of shoes, I stuffed them in without care. By the time I was done, the suitcase sat by the front door like a silent ultimatum. Hours later, the sound of her car pulling up made my chest tighten. I stayed in the living room, arms crossed, staring at the door as it creaked open. Emily stepped inside, her eyes red from crying, mascara smudged down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Let me explain." I gestured toward the suitcase. "No more lies. No more excuses. You made your choice when you met him behind my back." Tears spilled down her face as she dropped her purse onto the floor. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Daniel came back into my life, and I didn't know how to tell you. I thought I could handle it, but I was wrong." Her words were like daggers, each one cutting deeper. "You thought you could handle it? By lying to me? By looking me in the eye every night and pretending everything was fine? I never stopped loving you," she cried. I got confused. I shook my head. Love doesn't look like secret dinners and whispered conversations. Love doesn't destroy trust. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, but I didn't move to comfort her. For the first time in years, the distance between us felt impossible to cross. The room felt unbearably heavy, like the air itself had thickened. Emily sat with her face in her hands, sobbing, while I stood cold and motionless. The suitcase by the door was the only soundless witness to the end of what we once were. Finally, she lifted her head, eyes red and swollen. "Can't we try to fix this?" she pleaded. "We've been through so much together. Doesn't that mean anything?" Her words cut me, but I couldn't let myself weaken. "It used to mean everything," I said quietly. "But every late-night lie, every excuse you fed me, chipped away at it until there's nothing left. I made a mistake," she cried. "A terrible one. But I never meant to hurt you like this." I clenched my jaw, holding back the storm inside. "You didn't just hurt me, Emily, you destroyed the foundation of our marriage. Trust. And without trust, there is nothing." For a long silence, we just stared at each other, two people who once promised forever, now strangers standing in the ruins of those vows. At last, I walked to the door, grabbed the suitcase, and set it outside on the porch. When I turned back, Emily was trembling, her face pale with the realization that this was real. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't do this." I opened the door wide. "You already did." She let out a strangled sob, picked up the suitcase, and walked past me. The night air swallowed her as she stepped outside, and for the first time in years, I felt utterly alone. The door closed behind her with a final click that echoed louder than any argument we'd ever had. And in that silence, I knew the truth: the marriage we built together wasn't just broken. It was gone. The days after Emily left were a blur. The house felt hollow without her presence, the smell of her perfume gone, the sound of her voice absent. For years, we had built a life together, and now I was surrounded by nothing but empty rooms and memories that hurt more than they comforted. At first, I felt like I was drowning. I replayed everything in my head, the lies, the dinners, the way she smiled at Daniel. Part of me kept asking if I could have done something differently, if maybe, somehow, I could have prevented it. But every time I asked myself that question, I came back to the same answer: she made a choice. Friends and family tried to comfort me, but the truth was, this was something only time could heal. I filed for divorce, and when the papers were served, Emily didn't fight it. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to fight for. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, I began to find myself again. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends I had drifted away from, and started focusing on the parts of my life I had neglected while trying to hold a broken marriage together. One evening, as the sun set, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. For the first time in a long while, I felt a strange kind of peace. The betrayal still hurt, but it no longer defined me. I realized something important that night: sometimes the truth destroys what we thought was unshakable, but it also frees us. Emily chose deception. I chose to walk away. And in doing so, I gave myself the chance to start over. The marriage was gone, but my life wasn't. It was mine to rebuild, stronger, wiser, and finally, honest. Months passed, and the storm inside me slowly began to settle. Life didn't feel as heavy anymore. The house that once echoed with emptiness began to feel like my own space again. I rearranged furniture, painted a few walls, and even adopted a dog, something Emily and I had always argued about. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control over my own life. But just when I thought the past was behind me, Emily reappeared. It was a Saturday morning. I was out front trimming the bushes when her car pulled into the driveway. My chest tightened as I watched her step out, suitcase in hand, not the same one from that night, but another, as if she had rehearsed this moment. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft, almost fragile. I set down the clippers and crossed my arms. "About what?" "There's nothing left to say." Tears welled in her eyes. "I made a mistake. Daniel, it wasn't real. It was a fantasy, and it fell apart the moment you walked out of that restaurant. I lost everything, and I've been living with that regret every single day." I wanted to believe her. Part of me still ached at the sound of her voice, still remembered the woman I had fallen in love with. But another part of me, the stronger part, remembered the lies, the nights alone, the picture I had taken of her with him. "You didn't just lose me," I said firmly. "You lost the trust, the love, the respect we built together. That doesn't come back with an apology." She broke down crying, right there in the driveway. "I don't want forgiveness, I just want another chance." I shook my head, my voice steady. "Second chances are for people who tell the truth the first time." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't move toward her. I couldn't. Not anymore. After a long silence, she nodded slowly, as if she finally understood. She picked up her suitcase, got back into her car, and drove away, this time for good. And as I stood there watching her disappear down the street, I realized that sometimes the hardest part of love isn't letting go of the person who betrayed you. It's holding on to yourself and refusing to let betrayal define who you become. The morning after Emily drove away for the last time, I woke up to a silence that felt different. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of betrayal, it was the quiet of peace. For the first time in months, I made breakfast without feeling a pit in my stomach. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the floor, and realized something important: I wasn't broken anymore. I was free. The pain of her lies would always be part of my story, but it didn't have to be the ending. I had survived the truth that destroyed our marriage, and in the process, I discovered strength I didn't know I had. I began writing again, something I'd abandoned years ago. I spent weekends hiking, meeting new people, and laughing in ways I hadn't in so long. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became mine again, unshackled from the weight of deceit. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about Emily. Not with anger anymore, but with acceptance. She chose her path, and I chose mine. And while her lies ended our marriage, they also gave me the chance to rebuild my life from the ground up, stronger, wiser, and more honest than before. As I stood on my porch one evening, watching the sky fade into shades of orange and gold, I whispered to myself, ****, this isn't the end. It's the